This is Sporting Life.
Well, welcome along to the Sporting Life Racing Podcast. David Orr, joined this week by Ed Chamberlain, Graham Cunningham, Billy Nash and David Johnson. And Ed, welcome back. I mean, I've been wondering where you've been for the last couple of weeks, and then I've suddenly seen, I've put my Sky Plus, other providers are available on, to record Saturday morning's James Martin's Saturday Kitchen. The name's Ed Chamberlain on this week's show.
Don't call it Saturday Kitchen, Ollie. That's the show on the BBC he left.
Oh, apologies. What's it called now?
You count him as a friend of yours from Yorkshire, don't you?
One of the great. Yeah, I saw him at a Real Ale Festival once and got his autograph. Never asked for it, but I did receive the autograph. Very nice. But is it already in the can, Ed? How did it go?
It was fun, actually. It was fun. James Martin's father-in-law is a big punter, which helped. So he wanted to talk about racing. And James Martin absolutely loves Cheltenham, which helps as well. And he talked about the thrill of Cheltenham and so on and so forth. And I got to talk about the festival. And we started with sole goujons, Audie, and then moved on to a prawn linguine, which was excellent. And he literally cooks, talks, and listens to the producer in his ear all at the same time, which is pretty phenomenal.
Did you do any of the cooking? Do you actually get involved with the pan?
No, thankfully not. You just sit there and drink wine. And it clashes with the opening show. It's going to be remarkable, actually, on Saturday. It clashes with the opening show. With an hour of coming off air on James Martin's Saturday show, Audie, I will be in Kelso.
Nice to have goujons. Nice to have goujons.
Love goujons. And
were
the prawns in there?
Basically fish fingers, really.
That's what they call them on the kids' menu.
That's like plenty of metaphorical gravy to me.
We'll be joined later by Ed's wife to discuss how little cooking actually does at home, which is one of the hardest interviews we've had on this podcast. Let's get on with the racing or racing stories and a change to the running order with the Kempton Racecourse Gallop for Constitution Hill on Tuesday. It's put his champion hurdle bid in the balance. Bill, of the five of us on this podcast, you're the one who's worked closely in the racing stable. You're the one who's experienced this. I mean, Henderson's made the point that his preparation is almost complete and that if he can get the antibiotics work by Friday, that it could still be all systems go. How big a scare do you think this is?
It's far from ideal, Dave, but it's not terminal to his chances of turning up at Cheltenham just yet. Now, obviously, I don't know all the specifics of this, but I'm assuming what has happened already is they've started him on a course of antibiotics. We'll know a lot more on Friday. Henderson said in his statement last night that they're going to rescope the horse on Friday, and that will tell us an awful lot more. If he has responded to the antibiotics, then they've got plenty of time to get him back on track to Cheltenham. If he hasn't, then that's a different story entirely. I think the timing of this has probably worked in Henderson's favour. If it was next week, for example, then I think it would be curtains. But because they have 2 weeks, and like you said, probably most of his hard training is done now at this stage anyway. You know, think of an athlete before a marathon or something. You're starting to taper off now, so all the serious work is done. It's probably only going to keep him ticking over from now until Cheltenham. He'll get a blow next week at some point. But even the fact that he's on this course of antibiotics now shouldn't affect that, provided, like I said, that he does respond to them in the next couple of days. So, like I said, it's not the type of thing you want to happen, but they probably have enough time to get it over it.
GC was very public. Obviously, the press were there watching the gallop at Kempton. We knew in advance he was going there. How do you react to sort of the way that Henderson's reacted afterwards and the news that's been coming out of Seven Barrows?
I think he handled adversity really well. You know, it's not a tragedy; it's a setback. Obviously, he said we have a problem, but he kept people informed very quickly. He was on Radio 4 this morning with Rob Bonnet, who called him Mr. Henderson twice in the build-up. So some old habits die hard. But I thought Henderson was good. He made some reference to honey. And magic potions, which I'm not sure about the old magic potions. But there you go. But no, I thought he handled himself well. It adds a fascinating new dimension, various dimensions actually adds, including the old silence the doubters dimension now, doesn't it? Because there's always a bit of siege mentality around this saga, and this has added another layer of intrigue to the whole story.
David, we've had it happened before, and horses get off the canvas in time to win. Henderson, famously with Binocular, who was out the champion hurdler, Martinstown MOT later. He was back winning it under Tony McCoy. I mean, it's 1-2, no run and no bet still Constitution Hill. Do you think? How do you see? Do you think this completely changes the race?
Well, it does at the minute, and it makes it. I mean, the non-runner no bet angle has completely killed the race, hasn't it? From a betting point of view now, and everyone's just going to have to sit on their hands and wait for further information because, at best prices, we've got 4 to 6 Constitution Hill, 8 to 11 State Man, 100 to 30 Lossiemouth, 6 to 1 Irish Point. I think I went down all the entries. It's a 220% book. So, you just cannot have a view on the race because we don't know who's going to turn up and even if he does get the all clear, it's going to be difficult to know what kind of shape he's in. So, as GC said, it adds a real interesting dimension to a race. We thought we were going to go there and it was going to be something of a procession for the real Constitution Hill at his best, even with State Man looking better than ever this year. It looked unlikely that he was going to be able to take his form up to the level to match what Constitution Hill has done at his best. But let's just hope he does get there because it is going to add to a really interesting race. And we will see if a few others that may have decided to go elsewhere, maybe they could be pulled back into the frame, perhaps.
Just one quickie from me before we move on. It's not really been touched on in the round. We're looking at the best 2-mile hurdler in the land, Constitution Hill, in danger of missing the meeting. The champion chaser, the winner of the champion chase last year, Energumene, has been ruled out quite some time ago. The most devastating 2.5-mile chaser, Allaho, former Ryanair winner, is off games, and a potential star staying hurdler, Thalem, who was pushing hard for favouritism for the Stayers hurdle, he's also been ruled out. So it's a festival that has been hit hard by injuries to the major stars already.
Ed, you'd be desperate for him to get there, wouldn't you, from an ITV perspective?
Yeah, all those sources the GC mentions is absolutely right. But from our point of view, Constitution Hill is the real A-lister in all of them. He'd have been the headline act on Tuesday, make no mistake, even though, Henderson and Buckley get so much grief. He would have been the star turn, no question, in terms of the headline act on day one, and hopefully he still will be. I did feel sorry for them yesterday, I really did. In that glare with everyone there filming the piece of work, and there was Henderson and Buckley, and as I say, for all the stick they've taken, I do feel very sorry for them in this situation. And it's not going to make the race any more interesting in terms of other horses coming in. Lossiemouth would be the only one. I still can't see her running. I really can't see them coming to chase. Yeah, Billy's shaking your head. So it can only be negative if there's no Constitution Hill.
I thought it was interesting to see the amount of Schadenfreude there was around on social media yesterday. Yeah. And it sort of rams home, how have we got to this situation where 80% of Twitter was delighted by the fact that Constitution Hill may not be going to Cheltenham, and it's just a sad state of affairs, really.
Bill, we don't think Lossiemouth jumps. I agree. There's no indication whatsoever from close something that's even under consideration. 2 who might. Irish Point's already been put in there by Gordon Elliott as a potential runner. You'd imagine this will probably sway very much in the favour that he would go. And if you're Henry de Bromhead and you sat there and would you still not be tempted with that supplementary stage open to stick Bob Ollinger in for one more go?
Did they take him out though, at that stage?
They did. You can put him back in, can't you? You can pay the extra.
The old Chris Kin.
Yeah, they could, but I don't think they will, Dave. And it's probably because of Irish Point. They're in the same ownership. So I would imagine, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Irish Point does turn up in the champion hurdle now, especially with the forecast. And they're talking about having soft ground for the start of the festival. That'll really suit him. And obviously, Irish Point's owners also have Tehupo, who is the favourite for the Stayers hurdle. So they'll probably try and split their pack a small bit. I can't see Bob Ollinger at this stage being supplemented, being put back into the champion hurdle. I think they've made their decision as far as he's concerned. So Irish Point is a possibility. Yeah, he would certainly add a bit of depth to the race without a doubt. But I certainly don't see Lossiemouth turning up unless something happens to State Man in the next week. I can't see her running in a champion hurdle.
Is he quick enough, Billy? Irish Point. Has he got the speed to?
He's probably not good enough, Dave. I mean, he might be good enough he'll be good enough to get placed maybe, because there's really not much behind the first two. But no, you couldn't see him. I couldn't see him beating State Man, for example, and obviously State Man has a lot to do to beat a non-sound Constitution Hill. So, like I said, he'll add to the race, but I couldn't see him, playing a major part really.
I think the Betfair market's interesting with regards to what you might see coming in, because obviously the non-runner no bet angle we touched on has affected the fixed odds firms, but I think there's still like 20-1 bar 2 and 85-1 bar 4. So there's perhaps not that many leaping to get involved yet, even without Constitution Hill.
The cupboard's that bare, isn't it? You can't actually think of much more that should be.
We should mention, the binocular line's a good one. Over to JP's place, back with a bang. Kicking King is a broadly similar one. 2005 Gold Cup. He was, I don't know the specifics. I've been trying to find out exactly what the issue was. Funny enough, I had a chat with Tom Taff at the weekend, but Tom was not happy with Kicking King a couple of weeks before the 05 Gold Cup. But whether it was mucus or not, he blossomed again. Best mate broke a blood vessel. That may or may not have played a part in the decision. And he was back on track, having been a big price, 999, I think, on Betfair, and went and romped home in the Gold Cup. So it's far from unprecedented for a superstar horse to have an issue and then come blazing back to victory.
Time from history career. Phil Turner also put up Mr. Mulligan and Dawn Run at their Gold Cups. Well, both of those two worked badly. The week before, runs were in the balance and they made it and won. So, and Phil would know, wouldn't he, Billy? That's one thing you can say.
Absolutely, he would. Yes, I wouldn't argue with him.
I didn't. I just said thank you. Ed Chamberlain.
Is there a chance that Constitution Hill could run in the Champion Hurdle and be pushed very hard for favouritism? What do you think? Especially if Willie wins the Supreme and maybe the Arkle as well.
I think there's a real chance. I don't think there's a cat and else chance he starts at 1-2, which is the current shortest season of running no bet. Do you? I just think people will look and think, even if you're 5, 6, 7 pounds below peak Constitution Hill, you're right down towards state man territory, aren't you, at that point?
Even a couple of the bookies reps yesterday were saying that they're quite happy to take him on at the moment, So yeah, I think he'll be a better price than people would be expecting, maybe.
Their reps ought to have a word with their compilers then and knock out a little bit from that 4-6.
They would have done in the old days, David. Oh, those days have gone. Ed Chamberlain, let's move on to not particularly as engaging a subject, but a very important one: the affordability checks debate in Parliament. We saw on a grainy screen the great and good MPs debating, obviously a very important issue for the funding of racing. The BHA were encouraged by what they saw. I don't know how much of it you saw, what your takeout was.
I was encouraged by how many people were there. I was very surprised by that. All the negativity building up towards it. And then in the couple of weeks beforehand, at one point, it sounded like there'd be very few there. And then that started to get a little bit more momentum. I was still surprised when I saw the photographs of how many people actually attended, which is excellent. So well done to everyone who rallied their MP and so on and so forth. And the debate made for very interesting listening, actually. I've listened to most of it. And some of the speeches were very, very good and made a lot of sense. And I think it's made me more hopeful. I don't know about you, Audie. It's made me more hopeful of the outcome. It's just looming over all of it is the way the election's going to go, because they're a lot shorter price, the Labour Party, the Constitution Hill. In fact, they're absolute certainties. And then what happens? This could all become almost irrelevant, which puts a bit of uncertainty in my head. But yeah, I was encouraged by the debate. I really was.
That's been an interesting line as well, hasn't it, GC, that the BHA moving towards speaking to the shadow ministers and the shadow people. It seems as if they're now preparing for May, whenever it comes, whatever the election comes, that there are different plates spinning here.
Yeah, I've been a bit in the shadows with this. I've not kept right on top of this story. I don't pretend to be an expert on all its nuances. I do know that it's a debate that has united racing's dysfunctional family like nothing I've ever seen before. Every faction, owners, trainers, breeders, media, racing channels, bookmakers, etc. So why does the whole thing still leave me a bit uneasy? I'll tell you why. A few quick reasons. I've seen big juggernaut bookmakers ride roughshod over punters in many ways for years on end. And now I'm watching the whole industry do the dirty work for them. I've seen a trade paper who did precious little about punters who were being stopped from winning, now caping up so that punters can keep losing. I find that really strange. I look around and I see Matt Hancock and I see Philip Davis and I see the woeful Farage chipping in now, and I don't like my allies. But most of all, There's no nuance. There's no nuance to anything in political life anymore. None whatsoever. You're either a hero or a villain, you're one end or the other. And here we have the subject of addiction, which is, it's highly, highly important, and measures to try to check that addiction are being completely ignored by most people in racing. They're very happy to ignore it. Now, I know this is sledgehammer to crack a nut thing, and I don't trust a lot of these politicians and lawmakers to run a bath, let alone a major industry like this. But if you've been close to addiction, if you've seen people who are in the grip of it, you've seen what it does to them, or just as importantly, what it does to their families and all the people around them, you wouldn't be thinking this is quite such a black and white issue. So I'm uneasy about the whole thing. I have been from start to finish, and that's generally why I've tried to lay out of it. But there you go. They're my thoughts.
Interesting points to make as well. David, another big story this week, an exclusive Racing Post, Lee Mottershead, undercover report exposing a black market bookmaker. One thing that struck me was how it didn't work the way that I thought WhatsApps, the match deposit. It was at least an insight into how these things, or this one in particular, worked, how people were getting to the black market to start with.
Yeah, it's a concern, isn't it, that it does seem as though there is a way that people are being pushed to the black market as though it is seen as their only option. And I think, we've got to have a look at, I totally agree with GC about it's important that there is some sort of protection for vulnerable people from gambling harm. But I also think you've got to ensure that there's protection for people that are placing bets in good faith as well. And, if you're a winner, you should get paid, simple as. And that isn't the case at the moment. And that's whether you on the black market or sometimes in certain examples with some of the big corporate firms as well. So it is a worry that people are being forced in this way. There's some horror stories on social media that you see of people that have deposited large amounts with these black market bookmakers that have then turned those large amounts into even larger amounts. And then they're just completely coming up against brick wall when they're trying to make the withdrawals. So it's just a real big mess, isn't it? And there's no simple solutions that are going to please everybody.
It's an interesting piece of journalism, wasn't it, GC? The way that they played the tapes as well. You had the recordings with the people. It was a proper expose.
It was good effort. Well done to all concerned. We must also add the rider that you could have done that at any time in the last 10 years. It's not like illegals have just fallen out of a clear blue sky. Probably doing better business now because of affordability checks, but they've always been around. I always remember Mark Winstanley used to reference Ronnie Regal, the caring illegal, in his copy. It's not a laughing matter at all. It's a very serious matter. But all these things, I came across a similar incident previously. I think I've mentioned this before. I was at a conference on illegal gambling, and a very senior person spoke about it. Illegal gambling. This is illegal gambling in Asia, which I'm sure is massive. And he quoted figures, but really precise figures, And I went up to him at the end and said, wow, that was really interesting. I enjoyed that. But where did you get your figures from out of interest? He tapped the side of his nose and said, ever heard of 350 million on the side of a bus? Which was the Tory lie spouted about Brexit, about what would come to the NHS. In other words, it was a made-up number. I think it's utterly impossible to get a real handle on what the illegal market consists of. It's obviously considerable, but who knows exactly how relevant it is. For example, we're all in this racing game all the time. How many of us know people who are betting with illegal bookmakers? Because I may be naive, but I don't know hardly any.
I don't know a single one. I genuinely don't. I thought the interesting point was with the way the exposure was. I don't know. I always see this vision of the legal bookmaker, a website somehow. It was all set up and it looked legal and just didn't happen to be. But this was like screenshots, wasn't it, that you sent a WhatsApp to? And absolutely unmanageable offers on deposits, match deposits, and incredible. If you haven't seen it, please do. It's a great.
For bruising.
It was like a throwback to the dot-com boom, wasn't it? You sort of think how the offshore bookmakers turned up there, and absolutely it was.
Ed, let's talk about something, a better piece of news. Well, you hosted the Thoroughbred Awards this week. Always looks to be a feel-good now, that rewarding the people who work in the industry. How was this year's?
Oh, my goodness, what a contrast to what we've just talked about. I mean, if you're getting down about restrictions, affordability checks, small fields, whatever it might be in our game, I mean, just have a watch of the Thoroughbred Industry Employee Awards. I mean, honestly, Audie, it's an extraordinary room full of incredible people, really, so uplifting. And there were some amazing moments on the night. The winner, called David, was a man of few words, I think it's fair to say. Interviewing him was a little bit like when I interviewed Jose Mourinho, infamously, when every answer to the questions were yes and no. I got nothing out of it. He was so overcome with emotion. It was very endearing, very, very endearing. And he works with Nathaniel and all these horses, and he just loves the horses. If you talked about horses, you were fine. He was brilliant. In the room, you had other extraordinary people. There was one girl called Lauren Semple, Audie, who won the Community Award. She works with the Scottish Police, and basically using horses as therapy for young people who've got into trouble, whatever it might be. Just incredible. And she was in floods of tears when she won the award. I had to give her a minute before I interviewed her. And the Princess Royal was there. The judges, Nick Luck and his team, do an amazing job. They dedicate a lot of time to try and get it right. How they do that, I do not know, because you want everyone to win that's there. And it was just the most fabulous evening. And Lauren is actually coming on ITV on Saturday, which hopefully will be really good for the sport to hear the good that horses do, particularly after retirement. So, yeah, a really good evening. Well done to the BHA and Godolphin and everyone that makes that happen. Very, very heartwarming.
Really good stuff. And the Grand National Weights Lunch you hosted. Now, the comments made on the podcast last week.
I heard you all. I heard you.
It's time to spruce it up. I mean, you've yet to offer to defend to the lack of a starter, which I've thrown at you 3 times and got nothing back.
I can't defend that. That was an absolutely appalling decision. I'm so sorry.
Well, thank you. And until it returns, I won't. I'm making it very clear. Well, go on then, Ed. Why is it still special for you?
Listen, I always say wherever I go, I say it's my favourite event to host. I do like the Thoroughbred Industry Awards, and I mean, Southampton's end of season awards would be my absolute favourite. But I like this one. I went with you years ago, Audie, years ago, when I first probably started as a Sky Bet ambassador. Probably 20 years ago, I went to London to the weights lunch, and I really enjoyed it. But, geez, it went on forever. You were in your element. You loved it. You had Phil Smith. I could never understand why Phil Smith was at the absolute heart of it. I nearly missed. I used to do the graveyard shift on Sky Sports News in those days from 8 till midnight. And I nearly missed it because I was at a lunch. And I couldn't understand why an event in Liverpool was being launched in London. I mean, like launching the Melbourne Cup in Sydney. I just couldn't get my head around it. And you go to it this year, and I heard what you said, and I forwarded your comments to Tony Bellew and the chap at Natasha Jonas, and they'll speak to you about it.
Yeah.
And I understand where you're coming from. Of course, it is different now, and there's less for you to write about because the weights are what they are, and Martin Greenwood does it the way he does it. What's really important for me about the event, Audie, is one, it's in Liverpool, and two, the success of the Grand National is all about Liverpool and its connection with the local community. And the event last week was all about Liverpool. It was all about the people in the room. Alderhay were there in force. Their nurses sang. It was very, very emotive. The local council is there. Sir Kenny Dalglish is there. Sue Johnson. All these different people are there. It is all about connecting with Liverpool. And that is why, in my opinion, the Grand National is such a success still. It's got everything that the Derby doesn't have with Epsom. And that is why I still think it's relevant and still very important.
That was one of the great things, wasn't it, when the protesters got involved last year? There was so many locals from the area that just came out and got them off the track as well. It wasn't just the police presence that
it's their event. It's their. I used to go up and do the football in Liverpool, and I was treated quite rightly, like an absolute scumbag. They had no time for me whatsoever. If I was at Goodison, you'd be getting grief from the Reds and the other way around. You go up now, and they just welcome you with open arms. You can't pay for a drink. It's their event. They're so pleased to have you. And that is why the Grand National continues to thrive in a very difficult time, let's be honest.
Tony Bellew was listening. Big fan, Tony. Was a
boxing. And Audie, the youngsters are there. The trendy folk were there. TikTokers and influencers and Niall Hannity and Get Stuck In were there.
Can't have everything.
Dave, it might be a nice time to talk about, is it a new national favourite? Not for me, Clive. to quote another football phrase.
Andy Townsend.
I am Maximus. Billy Nash, over to you.
Yeah, hardly surprising after what he did last week. That was a pretty impressive performance. He dismissed last year's national runner-up Vanillier, but the issue with I Am Maximus, and it's been the issue with I Am Maximus all through his career, is his jumping. He's got away with it in the Irish national. He got away with it on Saturday, but he jumps violently left, and it's likely to come back to haunt him at some stage. He wouldn't be an obvious, I wouldn't say there'd be too many fellas sticking their hand up to ride him around Aintree. For all that he will have a great chance if he goes there. Willie was talking about him in terms of a potential Gold Cup horse. Thinks he might even make it to a Gold Cup horse next year. So he clearly has the engine. But again, I'm not sure he's one I'd like to be taking a sharp price about for the national.
No, me. He's flatbred. Now, obviously, he's made into a very smart chaser. His running power is tremendous. But I agree. I think combination of that jumping left, Billy, and the fact that in a big field, he's likely to get well back. I think that could spell trouble for I Am Maximus.
Vanillier in second, Billy. He's still favourite in places, or joint favourite with I Am Maximus. Did he do his entry chances any harm at all for you?
No, definitely not. I mean, I think you can see what way his season is going. It's very much geared around entry. They're building him up gradually. That was a nice stepping stone. He finished second in the race last year as well, I think. He was. I'm sure they'd have been quite happy with that performance. No, the only thing is he'll meet I Am Maximus on worse terms at Aintree, but he has, I suppose, the experience of being around there before, and like I said, his season is very much geared around Aintree. So I think they'll be delighted with that, and I'm sure they've left a little bit to work on as well. And
the Billy Nash segment continues with Fernie Hollow, who we saw back with a win. I think about £16 below his peak chase figure on time farming winning on Sunday, but showed there's a good chunk of ability still there.
Yeah, he was very impressive. But look, let's put it into context. He was getting £7 off a veteran out of form handicapper in Rebel Gold. He beat him very comfortably. It was great to see him back. He went with loads of enthusiasm. He jumped really well. And I think the thing with Fernie Hollow is, the one question you ask yourself is what might have been with this horse, because since he's won the Cheltenham Bumper, he's run 4 times over jumps. He's won all 4 of them. He beat Bob Ollinger in the maiden hurdle. He's looked really impressive every time he's made the track, but unfortunately, he's got legs made of, I don't know, biscuits or something, because he just doesn't. They can't seem to keep him sound, which is a real pity. I think he could have gone right to the top over fences, but he's probably never going to realise his true potential now at this stage. He's still in the champion chase. I'd be absolutely amazed if he ran there. I think Willie will probably keep him for Fairyhouse, Punchestown, maybe something like that. But I don't know where he's going to go from here. But I think he's a day-to-day case. I mean, there were, even Willie was saying pre-race that his big hope was that he'd be sound the following morning. So, he's a really talented horse, and it's a shame that we won't probably ever get to see how good he really was.
David, if he was sound, they said that they won't go to champ. Would you not be, if you were Cheveley Park, thinking that the chances of him being sound this time next year for a champion chase are probably thin given his overall profile? If he is fit, healthy, would you not be tempted to bother Johnny G's big dykes and give him a roll?
Yeah, you can see the temptation that if he's fit, you go where you can with him, don't you? But equally, a horse coming off the absence that he was coming off, you're talking a 3-week turnaround. I think it makes more sense to hope that he's right for Punchestown, probably, doesn't it? And, just take that extra time. And like Billy said, it's sort of like blankety blank here. I could hold up my card. I've got written down what might have been, on my notes here. You sort of beating Appreciatus in a bumper, Bob Ollinger over hurdles, and it just hasn't worked out for him, has it? And it does look as though those physical frailties are going to stop him ever fulfilling his potential.
Back to the Cheltenham Festival now. It was ever thus, wasn't it? Ed, the weights were unveiled yesterday, not a lavish ceremony. It looked to be at the Hollow Bottom pub near Nigel Twiston Davis's, and Nick Luck was hosting. The only people I could see, Neil Marie seemed to be on the phone during the unveiling of the weights, and Ben Linford was eating right at the back. So it wasn't.
Is that because Constitution Hill's piece of work was?
Mate, no, I think
must have coincided, didn't it?
I don't think they got the phone signal there to find out about that. The festival handicap weights. I'm going to come to Billy. We've got Sam Adjest. We know 140. We'll get his verdict on that. Is there anything on your radar, Ed, for these Fez handicaps at this early stage?
There's plenty of interesting things already, but as a punter these days, a bit like what you were talking about with the Grand National. It just doesn't have the same appeal because you just know on the day it's going to look completely different. All the bookmakers are going to have fantastic offers, particularly with the place terms and so on. So what's the incentive to move now? I'm not sure there is one. And listen, there are lots of interesting lines coming out of it. The Scudamore-Russell team were very interesting up in Aintree because we obviously know about their record in the Ultima with Corot Ramble the last couple of years. Giovinco could be very interesting, and that might be where Apple Away goes as well. So listen, there's lots of interesting bits and bobs, but unlike 10 years ago, you'd be all over it. And, you know, I remember our anti-post book order was just chaos at this time of year. It's just so different now. There's so little incentive to get involved.
Absolutely. Agree with that, David. One thing that was interesting, the import tax have been put in on the overseas raiders. It was taken off with the French horse in the Boodles, I was reading. He's actually £10 lower, is it, than his French mark? Because he'd had a couple of sprints in England.
Yeah, I think he came over with a pretty high French mark, didn't he, earlier in the season? And obviously he's disappointed in 2 runs over here. And I think the handicap has taken the view that he can't reproduce that French form anymore and rated him on the more recent efforts, which I think seems a perfectly fair and reasonable view to take. It doesn't look like it's a plot job, but I guess we'll find out in a couple of weeks.
And JC, one thing that strikes me whenever you look at them, and I completely agree with Eddie, you wait for the day when you actually know what's running, what race are running, because there's so few of these have only got one option nowadays, haven't they? Everything seems to be in 2 or 3 races.
Absolutely. And Ed mentioned a horse that I'm intrigued by, Giovinco, and I'd like to see him go for the Ultima. I think Mark in the mid-140s would be interesting, but he's there in the Ultima handicap chase. He's around 14-1. He's in the Brown Advisory, and he's in the Turners, and I sense that connections are maybe inclining towards Group 1 options. So no, it's not a race to get a bet on. I really envy those people who still have the enthusiasm and work ethic to start wading through the handicaps at this point. But as for the reasons Ed just outlined, there's ample time to get involved. But I will be keeping an eye on Giovinco's festival target. It's a weird thing because when you have, I sense that he's a good horse, but he's been in a sort of 2-runner race and a 4-runner race and what have you. And you're just speculating as to how they might handle the demands of a big handicap.
My vibe is GC. My vibe would be you're right. I think they'll go Grade 1 Giovinco. I think they'll go Apple Away Ultima, I think.
Yeah.
So, Billy, Sam Jess, you put up as your dark horse for the festival. He wasn't even quoted at the time. You were a trailblazer. He's now favourite for the Covell Cup. I think match by 140. I get the impression they'll probably be happy enough with that.
If the cat wasn't out of the bag about Sam Majest already, Dave, it certainly is now after Willie's Sporting Life stable tour yesterday, where he described him as a potential Gold Cup horse. So if he is that, then I'm sure they'll be delighted with a mark of 140. I was talking to Matt, the Brocklebank, about this way back in January. And
the Brock.
we both, we kind of hit on a mark of around 140 is what, I thought would be a fair mark for him. I think they'll be thrilled with it. I mean, I'm looking back at some of Willie's other recent handicap winners at Cheltenham. Galopin des Champs won a Martin Pipe off 142. State Man won a County Hurdle off 141. They know exactly what's required to win off a mark like this. He's an impossible horse to get a proper handle on from a handicapper's point of view, but I'm sure they'll think that they have loads in hand off that. And I would say whatever race he runs in, he's going to be a pretty sharp price for.
GC, I know you don't leave the house this time of year without a John Ketley bespoke weather forecast. We've seen lots of trainers all the time. They're going to come to life on proper spring ground at these big festivals. It's currently soft at Cheltenham, an unsettled forecast through the next 2 weeks before John's even hit the weather map. The chances are this year, all years, we might not see good to soft ground for the festival for the first time in a while.
Well, true. It can dry up quite quickly. I think a lot of punters would be hoping that it stays on the soft side because it's pretty much all we've had. The entire form book this winter, Britain and Ireland, is based on testing grounds. So a real early arrival of spring would pose horses with a different question. That said, I can't think of too many, certainly Mullins stars who have not handled spring ground. And when I haven't seen it all, but Fran Berry's festival file with Willie Mullins, the star power is awe-inspiring, and I think the way he talks about the horses as well, Dave, it's not hype or what have you. He absolutely has this unshakable faith in quite a few of them. When you hear him talking about El Fabiolo and about Factor File and Galopan and State Man and various others, it is, even without Allaho and even without Grange Clare West and at least a couple of other stars who are on the sidelines, that the depth in that team is just insane, isn't it?
Well, it's just with the affection the horses have got for him as well. When they stood in the box, they're nuzzling up, aren't they? Often you'll see them turn their back and look the other way, whatever. But these all, I don't know. It's an amazing place and absolutely amazing team of horses he's put together. I'm going to switch to the flat now. David Johnson, the racing in Saudi Arabia last Saturday, 2 big winners for Northern Stables. A big stories too in Anaf and Spirit Dancer.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic piece of placement, wasn't it, by Connections, Richard Fahey. Obviously, Spirit Dancer gets a lot of publicity because of the ownership and the connection to Sir Alex Ferguson. And he's just a horse that has gone from strength to strength, but it really was a good bit of placement. His time form rated 119, didn't have to improve on that to win that local Group 2 out over there the other day. And I think the prize money at 950,000 quid, or the equivalent of, it's a lot of races that he'd have to turn up in the UK to win that. It's probably twice as much as what he'd get for winning something like the Prince of Wales, isn't it? So, and same comments, with Anaf, who, £950,000 for a gelding who's, going to be a sprinter. It's just phenomenal money and great placement, and really good to see Connections making the most of it.
That's probably covered Fergie's section of Caldwell Potter, isn't it?
Yeah.
A large chunk of it anyway.
Signed off. I did like the Fergie line as well, just about how he haggled half the fee off Frankel when he bred Spirit that to you. You won't want to be doing transfers with him if you've got Judmont to half that fee.
Absolutely. No, I was there at the weekend, and I owe you a thank you, Dave. You offered to kindly handle all the messages for Anaf, so thanks for that. I do appreciate it. Brilliant story, Anaf. 16 grand unraced. Mick Appleby. There's absolutely, it wasn't magnified, and I get it, delicious irony about Mick Appleby winning a race in Saudi Arabia. I was just behind Ed Foster, salute to Ed, and his wife and 2 little kids getting on the plane the following morning, coming home. Bloke who's not worth billions, got into the game 3 or 4 years ago, rang up Mick Appleby, ended up with a 16 grand unraced Shadwell chuck out. And here we go. The other 2 points to mention, Spirit Dancer, Fergie, Richard Fahey, Jed Mason, Peter Don, etc. Great. The 2 young jockeys, Russell Ryan, who was absolutely dashing on Anaf, and Oisin Orr on Spirit Dancer. I was watching those lads closely in the aftermath, and they were looking around, eyes, wide open, as if thinking, right, this is a bit different than what we're used to. Those 2 lads are both the right age and in the right slots now, where they can look forward to some very, very successful days ahead at home and abroad.
What about
let's not forget Ryan Moore.
Come on, David.
No, that's what I was going to say, that staying handicap as well, Ryan Moore. But Tower of London picked up 3 times what he would have done if he'd have won the St. Ledger, an enemy who got nearly 400 grand for finishing second, which is more than what you get for winning the Ascot Gold Cup. It's phenomenal. You can see why they're going out there and why they're not going over hurdles, can't you?
Absolutely. And enemy was finishing second for the 2nd consecutive year. So he's won the thick end of £1 million for not winning in Saudi in 2 excellent efforts. And he was brilliantly produced by Ian Williams, thwarted by a horse who was almost certainly a group race horse. No, it was a dramatic race, that. And it was at 1 million for Tower of London and pretty much half that for Enemy. So you're going to talk about the all-weather campaign here, and it's very well established. But David, he tried to cement valuable races for the all-weather here is a thankless task when these connections know that the real money in Jan and Feb is in Dubai and Saudi and Bahrain, Qatar, etc., etc.
I was just going to say it brings us on to the Winter Derby, and Military Order running to 118 wins 57,000.
He is the horse who I fancied for the Derby, like the real Derby last June, isn't he?
And Limper put him up as well. It was 2 votes for the Derby, and thanks for the messages. We didn't say which Derby. It wasn't stipulated which Derby he would be winning.
Then you had that one.
It was all road would always lead to Southwell. Ed, you at Kempton as well on Saturday. Lots of interesting racing. What were your key takeouts from that fixture?
Just going back to what we were just talking about for just a second, the one upside to all of that success for Mick Appleby, who is fantastic, Richard Fahey and so on, you just hope that rather than send your horse abroad to be trained, maybe you can still do it in this country and go and win those prizes. So maybe inadvertently it might keep a few more of those decent horses in this country. And Richard Fahey's obviously won a few quid. He rang me yesterday saying he wants to buy a new suit. So that was obviously a successful weekend for them.
I don't know what happened, Ed, but in the aftermath, he was tearing around Richard, and his shirt was completely untucked. He was running around like he was leaving the pub at 1 a.m. or something.
So chuffed for him, though. Well done to the Fahey team. Such good news. Kempton was fun, actually, Audie. And Graham McDowell has the strangest accent I think I've ever heard. Yeah. It's sort of northern,
hybrid.
It's sort of Northern Irish with an American twang.
Yeah.
Oh, with a distinct American twang. Yeah.
But he loved it. I think he really, really enjoyed it, which is great. And I loved his quote afterwards that Brooks Koepka wants to go to the Kentucky Derby with "Give me 5." Oh, that was really good. Listen, it's not the most high-profile day, but it had its moments. Audie, I think lump sum would be interesting if they go for something like the County with that horse. I think Nicholls' enthusiasm for Khalif de Burlay is infectious in the sense he's like you and I. He needs to fill into his frame a bit. He's a great big thing.
I thought you meant Paul. I was nodding at that.
He dwarfed Harry Derham's horse, and he didn't blow you away in many ways. I thought he was going to win that comprehensively, and us all go, wow. And he certainly didn't do that. But he's clearly not a 2-mile herder, and he's a horse with a future. And big picture-wise, great to have McDowell there. I hope they go to Cheltenham. It sounds like they might go to Ireland instead. And obviously with Fergie doing his thing in Saudi Arabia, good weekend for the sport, really, on what's normally quite a low-key weekend.
It's interesting that, Billy. I want to give you 5 being pointed towards Fairyhouse, and that small gap between Cheltenham and Fairyhouse this year, the early Easter, might open up 1 or 2 opportunities for people.
It might, and it's interesting as well, I suppose. They might see the fact that the British juveniles do seem to be quite strong this year. The Irish ones, there isn't really a standout Irish juvenile this year, and obviously Willie's going to send probably a big team to Cheltenham. Like you said, it's a quick enough turnaround. You might not have all of those horses back for Fairyhouse, so it is an interesting angle, definitely. If I could just say, well, one horse that certainly caught my eye, and I'm sure he must have caught loads of people's eyes on Saturday, was No Ordinary Joe of Nicky Henderson's. Somehow he didn't catch the eye of the stewards, which is quite surprising, I thought. But I think
he lost the shoe, Billy. That's why. I think that was
mentioned, Ed. Yeah. I'm sure that explains some of it. But yeah, I think to put it nicely, I think he was ridden with maybe another day in mind. So if somebody had him on their Cheltenham list, you certainly wouldn't have been put off by what you saw on Saturday. But apart from that, it was a pretty poor weekend. We didn't touch on this earlier, but pretty poor weekend for the Henderson horses. You know, you would have a slight concern about the stable form, I think.
Yeah. Did I read that 8 of the last 16 runners have pulled up?
Something like that, yeah.
Yes, it's a big number. But would most yards have some bugs around this time of year anyway? But is it? It wouldn't be uncommon, would it?
I love how Billy's now our horse. This is great.
Yeah, no, I'm basically. So you used to work with Van Bevy at John Oxford, didn't you, Billy? You have. I'm not made this up. You have plenty of experience in the great game.
Yeah, well, sure. Look, it does happen, Dave, and I mean every yard will have probably the odd horse coughing every now and again. So it's just to try and keep a handle on it, and you know, obviously you don't want it to spread. But yeah, it is a problem. It is an issue, and 9 times out of 10 we don't hear about these things. But it's only when it happens to the high-profile ones that it does come to the fore. But yeah, that would, like I said, that would be a concern for the Henderson horses going into Cheltenham. They'd like to see them running better than they are at the moment.
They said get a vet on this week's show. I said I don't need one.
Audie, just finally on Kempton. Just finally on Kempton. I do think Anthony Honeyball, and we've mentioned him before on this podcast. What a good trainer he is.
Yeah,
and I'd love to see him have a big handicap winner, most likely in one of the chases at the festival. He deserves it. He's a clever guy, and he targeted that race because that was a disappointing turnout for that big money. a race worth far more than the Ultima, and good for him. And I chatted to him afterwards, and he's very switched on, Anthony Honeyball, and fair play to him. And you mentioned that Fairyhouse meeting, Billy, and it's funny how the Mayor's Novice Hurdle is getting as much attention as any race at the Cheltenham Festival this year. It looks like it's going to be red hot. The warning would be, for me, that Fairyhouse, comes 10 days after?
About that, yeah.
And you just wonder, that grade 1 for the Mares there just might change plans possibly for that Mares Novice. I'm thinking Jay de Grugia, just a word of warning that big race only is, I think it's 10 days after the festival. So that Mares Novice might not be the red hot contest people think it is right now.
David, it's been the Cheltenham Stable Tours. We've had Ben Linfoot for us, hence his non-appearance this week. He's been in the Southwest. It was at Paul Nichols's on Monday. The great man, I thought it was quite a good because he said he's always thought you need a small but select team for Cheltenham. I don't recall that being the case 10 years ago. But there you go. One of the big takeouts from Paul was that he thinks Braveman's game is very overpriced for the Gold Cup. He cannot understand his price in relation to one or two of the British runners. How do you see it? Should he be a 16, 20 to 1 shot?
Well, you can see both arguments. It's like you can see why Nichols finds such a price insulting based on what the horse was capable of last year. Really impressive when winning the King George, and was the only one that gave Galopin des Champs a race in the Gold Cup. And if he comes back to that sort of form, then 16, 20 to 1 is a big price, but it's rather selective reading of the form book to totally disregard pretty much everything that he's done this season. Was really disappointing second time up in the Betfair, wasn't he? He gave him a pass first time up for that week finish because it was his reappearance. And then again, he hasn't really finished with a great deal of gusto, despite you could make excuses for him meeting interference off Shishkin in the King George. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see him run a big race and finish placed in a Gold Cup, would it? But equally, it's hard to see him beating an on-song Galopin des Champs.
Yeah, I agree with plenty of that, David, and it brings us into the territory of a lot of the tipsters now, particularly the Racing Pulse guys, a lot of tipsters, so many of them. And now they're making a case for horses at a biggish price. Braveman's Game would be a case in point. They know in their hearts that some of these favourites are absolutely rock solid, but they can't tip them at 4 to 5 or whatever. And if you look at Galopin, what he did in the Gold Cup, Hewitt, who was well beaten when falling, he's won the King George. Roll Pagaille won the Betfair Chase this season. Capodanno was beaten a mile by him. I Am Maximus has been a fence and a bit behind him twice. There is no question that a horse like Galopin is absolutely worth that very high rating that Time Form have on him. And its bottom line is, if he turns up hale and hearty, you're going to take a power of beating, no matter what tipsters say about thinking he faces a lot more to do than the betting suggests.
Ed Fergal O'Brien opened the doors for the first time to the media ranks, chasing his first Cheltenham Festival winners still. 2 big players this year. It'll be only a matter of time, given the ammunition he's getting together.
Yes, and getting better all the time. And I assume you're referring to Cranbow in the Stairs Hurdle, who will have a chance, though whatever Ireland run will be tough to beat, particularly Gordon Elliott's pair, unless Irish Point, I suppose, goes for the champion hurdle. And Dysart Enos is a fascinating runner who's campaigned very cleverly, getting weight in the Mayor's Novice. But again, I tell you, that race, for what is normally a pretty low-key affair at the festival, that's getting so much traction at the minute. Everyone seems to have a fancy this year in the Mayor's Novice. The Gordon Elliott horse is obviously being hyped, the Willie Mullins horse. There's plenty of others in there as well. So it's not going to be easy for Dysart Enos. As I say, I just wonder if we might lose 1 or 2 to the grade 1 and 10 days later. But she'd have a chance, Dysart Enos, but I think that's unusually strong, that race this year. So she might just have her work cut out.
Is there any chance that if she were to win, and she obviously is a live one, maybe not on the spot, but come the end of the week, Paddy Brennan might say, thank you and good night? Is that a possibility? Very much so. It's a great shout, that. Great shout.
Yeah. A big part of that team as well, hasn't he, over
that and Cheltenham's everything to him, GC. Yeah. Do you remember when he reached a big milestone? And I said, do you want me to mention that on TV? And he said, no, I'd much prefer you to say he'd had however many winners he'd had, 70-something at Cheltenham. Cheltenham's everything to him. It would be, what a way to stop that would be. It would be 1, brilliant, and 2, very, very realistic possibility. I'd say I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, is it around about 14 years since his last festival winners, which were 2 on the same day, Imperial Commander and Pigeon Island on the Friday, about 14 or 15 years ago, I think.
One to watch the great meeting. Now, this Saturday coming up, yeah, I used to think of it as the worst Saturday of the jump season because you're ready for Cheltenham, the Imperial Cup the week after, etc., etc. I've got to say, hats off to Kelso.
I'll have a go at you again there, Robbie.
No, I'm coming. I mean, there was literally big field handicaps on these cards with big entries at the 6-day stage, most horses running, good prize money. It's much improved, Ed.
Very much so. I'd have gone for last weekend. Stood out in the rain at Kempton as one of my least favourites, and that was actually all right this year. Yeah, fantastic. Fair play to them. Fair play to them. They're a really advanced, progressive racecourse with Jonathan and the team at Kelso. It's summed up by the reception we get tomorrow. We go up there and we get looked after tomorrow. They have a big dinner with all the trainers and owners, and they do it well, and they've been rewarded, which is really good to see. Put the money in and look what you can do. Well done the sponsors as well, it must be said. And you look at the entries for the Moor Battle, 1 with the prize money and 2 with the incentive of the 100 grand bonus that used to get so much attention the following Saturday at Sandown. Now it's all on Kelso. The Shunter did it, 2 or 3 years ago was that? So it's doable. And that is going to be a fantastic race. I think we'll get a maximum 18, won't we, Aldi, in the Moor Battle?
Should do, definitely.
You've got their best chase of the year to come later on the card as well. It's a really fun day out. I'm really pleased we go there. No offence to Doncaster and the Grimthorpe, but I'm delighted to be at Kelso. And it just shows what you can do. There'll be a good crowd there. And as Billy said earlier, I mean, all eyes on the Henderson horses this weekend. Under control. What a fascinating runner for so many different reasons. And if she runs badly, then the warning signs really will be out at Seven Barrows. So there's loads of interest in it. Lots of money on offer. Big fields, Audi. Fabulous. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, Bet365 put the money up for that fiction. Is rewarded with really competitive action. I should have asked this earlier. Anybody got any fancies for the weekend? I've been still working through the messages from GCs last week. I will reply to everybody who's been kindly in touch. But
back anything that Sandy Thompson runs at the minute.
What, Sandy Thompson selected for Ed? Anything on your radar at this stage, DJ?
No, sadly, the all-weather stuff is taking a little bit of a nosedive this weekend. It's predominantly Class 5 and Class 6 stuff at Wolverhampton and Kempton. So I'm sure I'll be delving into it on the day, but I don't think there's anything that's got me suggesting that I'm getting involved as of yet.
GC, is it too early for you to have views?
I'm going to mention 2 horses. They're not one-pointers because I haven't gone into the races in depth, but and I don't know whether Prairie Wolf will go on from Catterick yesterday to Kelso at the weekend, but that's an improving horse. He'll have a penalty for winning a small field race at Catterick, but he's in a valuable novice handicap chase. He may not run. Demnat is a horse I'm looking forward to seeing at Newbury in the Great Wood Gold Cup. He also has an entry on Friday over a shorter distance. He's up £10 for winning at Ludlow after a monster layoff. But he's a low mileage chaser. He jumped beautifully at Ludlow, beat 2 useful horses, and he beat them. He crushed them really. So a £10 hike doesn't look too dramatic, given the potential for more improvement. So keep an eye on him. He looks a very exciting, aggressive front runner. But no, I wouldn't go overboard. Just a couple of names who might be worth keeping an eye on.
And if you're busy doing podcasts, Audie, I'll deal with the messages this week, GC. I'll put my hand up for that.
Well, there's no points on.
I suspect he might be abusive ones this week.
Billy, last but least, I don't know what the race is like in Andy. Anything catching your eye anywhere?
Yeah, it's not a bad card actually at Navan on Saturday. There's a couple of graded races, but there could be a very interesting novice chase. It's a 2-mile, the Flying Bolt novice chase. We have a couple of horses that could go to the Arkle, but they might just be rerouted here instead. Willie Mullins has Blood Destiny and Tactical Move in the race, but there's also the likes of Spillans Tower. So it could be Spillans Tower who beat Blood Destiny over 2.5 last time out, reopposing back over 2 miles. I think Blood Destiny might take a bit of beating there if they run, of course. But it should be a very interesting race. There's also the Webster Cup on the card, where we might see Journey with Me, who was a very good novice last year. We haven't seen him since he took a heavy fall at the Punchstone Festival last season. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on on his return from a long absence. But yeah, Navan is an interesting card. There's the end of jump season at Leopardstown happens on Sunday and Monday. So it'll be interesting without being probably all that fantastic racing, but it's very much a case of people winding down prior to Cheltenham now at this stage.
Just
we
one
won't
quick
remind you,
thing
Darren.
I'd like to mention
Go on,
could
JC.
be a good item for ITV to cover, but come the festival. Racecourse Chaplain, Ben Fudge, great name, crazy guy. He's been taken on by Cheltenham as the Racecourse Chaplain, and he can offer a confidential listening ear to any racegoer who feels they need to speak to someone. He might be a busy man that week.
Quite as busy, nearly as busy as that little pharmacy that does a roaring trade over the 4 days as well, tucked away in the corner. We'll be busy too. We'll be back next week with a film special in Leeds, one location. We're actually staying in Leeds, but we have on location, with the big Cheltenham talking points and Festival Week itself. Podcast on a Monday, looking ahead to Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Wednesday, ahead to the final 2 days with a few thoughts. And early in the week, we'll be joined by Patrick Mullins, Touchwood, on that one as well. But before then, don't forget to watch Ed eating Buon Linguine on Saturday. I thought he was cooking it. I was tremendously excited.
Don't forget the goujons.
Well, the goosebumps as well, yeah.
Right to Mr. Fudge saying, Facile Vega, why 2.5, Ben? Why 2.5?
His soul goujons and his Buon Linguine. But that's on James Martin's Saturday Adventure. Saturday show. Don't upset James Martin as well as Tony Bellew. Thanks to Ed, to GC, to Billy and David. And if you're having a bet this weekend, best of luck with your weekend wagers.
Visit sportinglife.com for more analysis, tips, opinion and insight.